Okay. Okay, Balboa Park and me, Edna Kouns, celebrated our 100th birthday last year in June. And I was born right in San Diego, but my folks lived in Lakeside at the time. And, but it wasn't very long. It was about, my dad had a small dairy in El Monte Park, not too far from where where there were many dairies out there. Okay, so, and then on January 3rd of 1916, my sister was born. And on the 15th of January, the flood came. San Diego was low on water, and so they hired this rainmaker. Well, he really did produce the rain. It was a flood. And our house washed down the river. It was right in what's now the riverbed in El Monte. And my aunt, mother's sister, the Bogues, they were washed out. And the Saffords of San Diego and one other family and a nice brand new little schoolhouse. They'd been meeting for school in my uncle Clarence Foster's home. So they just moved into this new school. Well, then it was all gone. So in a few days, I don't know exactly how many, my mother drove a team of horses and pulled the wagon with my sister, who was not over a month old, and what little we had saved. And my dad rode horseback and herded the cattle that he had saved. And my aunt and uncle did the same thing. But one thing interesting about my uncle and aunt, they lived right close to us. But the water in 16 went on both sides of their house, and they couldn't walk out. We were able to get out. It was just the water was just on the north side. But anyway, they ended up, the house was gone, and my cousin that lived with me, well, a little over 100, died about 2 years ago. He said that I can remember so well, and we had to stay up in a tree. And my big sister and my two big sisters had to stay awake to see that Willard and I didn't fall out of the tree. And all of a sudden, after 3 days and nights, the water swished and went all on the north side. And Harry said, we all walked out, and the tree went down the river. That quick. But anyway, Mother drove the wagon, and with the two girls, and what we had saved, and my aunt did the same, and we went up the track where it used to be a dirt road, 2-lane road going to Ramona, and we'd go through Foster and on up. Well, of course now that's San Vicente Dam. So it would be right what is in the middle of San Vicente Dam. And we went up to Ramona and Julian, and then down the Banner grade to the old stagecoach road that went south across the sand and then over the mountains and down on the sand, and we'd come out somewhere around what's now Akatia Wells. And we went to the valley, and we lived there for several years. And then later we came back we sold the place there. It was when you could, I can't think of the word, where you can claim land.
Homestead.
Yeah, that's the way that we got the land in the valley. And Dad had a dairy there and raised cotton. But then an Easterner came out and bought up all the small farms, and we came back to Ocean Beach because when Mother, after she graduated from San Diego Normal, she had bought a lot in Ocean Beach. So Dad built a house in Ocean Beach, and we lived there just 2 years. And then we were out to Lakeside to stay, and that was in 1927. And during the time though that we were in the valley, my grandmother, Mrs. Foster, got sick, and Mother came over to take care of her. And so I went to the one-room schoolhouse in El Monte to school, all grades in one room. And Fritz' uncle was in the class that I was in. There were 3 boys and me. So anyway, then, now let's see, the next move was, we just stayed in Ocean Beach 2 years, and then we came back out to Lakeside. And I've been here ever since. But and during it was a long way from El Monte down to the old church. So Grandma Wilkinson, now she wasn't our grandma, but if any of your friends had a grandma, well, they were your grandmas too. And so Grandma Wilkinson had a place. It's about, if you're going to El Monte up to the park and you're going south, north, all of a sudden you turn and make that curve to turn north. Well, if you look off to the right, way off, quarter of a mile, you'll see a lot of big oak trees. And so we used to go up there, and we had Sunday school up there, and she moved her Victrola out, and that was our music, and we do that for 3 Sundays a month. And then we came to Lakeside, the old church on Main Street, the one Sunday, but it really was a long drive. And the thing is too, back then, you didn't have, most El Monte had a lot of dairies, and after all, dairyman's day isn't over. The milk, they don't have all this new technology that they have today. But in the Sunday school, well, it was like I say, we just went down there because it was a long way to go. But I think probably that's about enough. But if you want to find out any history at all about Lakeside, please come down to the old church. We have it now is owned by the Historical Society, and these are some of the books that you find. One's all about the dairies, one's all about the history of Lakeside. A lot of people, we have 550 big books, and you'd be surprised. You might find your history right in there. And but anyway, there are 550 big books besides all these pictures. It's really amazing at how much information there is down there. And we're open to the public really every day except Sunday and Monday. But Wednesday is the day that we still work on archives all day, putting from 10 to 2, I should say, putting in new information, and now we're transferring all those pages into archival material, which is a real job. But we'd love to have your history. So if anybody wants to write up their history, we've got a place for it. And if you do want to see anything learn anything about Lakeside, you can find it up there. And right now we're having to model, I don't know, because of the grandfather clause, we haven't had to change some of the things in the old church. We wanted, because it is Lakeside's only San Diego County historical landmark. but I'm not sure whether it's the government that is requiring us to put in a new ramp. Much ours was a little bit too steep and a little bit too narrow, and of course people with wheelchairs could still get in there, but I guess they're making larger wheelchairs now. I don't know. So right now the backyard's all torn up with this new ramp that's being built, and then we've had to change the tables and all. But we'd love to have you come up just any time, and please write your histories and let us have it in the we've probably got 125 books of nothing but history of people that have lived in Lakeside. And we'd love to have the history of a lot of you people that I know is not in there. Well, I think I've talked long enough.
Edna's a hard act to follow. I'm going to start back a few years. My parents lived when they were married at the Centenarian Methodist Church, and my brothers came along, and my mother was a school teacher, but she didn't work during the years that the children were home. So my father worked for Standard Oil, and they moved us around. So we went from there to various places, and I was born in Oceanside and lived up near Idlewild and different places where we were sent. But we came back, when I was 6 and a half, we came back, and I'd like to tell you how Lakeside looked to me at that time. There were the river was running. My dad took us for a ride, and we were all in the car, and we drove across the river, across the big old bridge and through town, and there were giant trees met in the middle of the road as you came down going west. And then we stopped at this place down at the very end of Lakeside, and right on Woodside, and our dad said, that's where you're going to live. We had lived elsewhere, and we were moving to Lakeside. My mother was going to be teaching there, and my father had just left Standard Oil there was a plant there in Santee, and he'd been transferred back, and he said what he was going to do was go in business for himself. Not a good move, because shortly after that the crash came, and it wasn't easy. My dad was one of those people that decided he could take care of people, and they'd call in the night, they were out of oil, he'd take it to them. That's how we heated in those days. And he was good-hearted, but lots of times they didn't have money because times were tough. But that's what he did. And we always had plenty to eat because we raised our own food, and we had a cow and horse and a few things and acreage. So it was a fun thing for us as kids. And up on the back hill next to our home, you could see the Indians had once been there because they had ground their corn in the big old rocks that are up there still. And you could see all the places. But anyway, I'll get back to where we are, where I was asked to talk about the Children's Center, which was a great part of my life. As you know, early on I went to college with the Sly brothers. Their last name was Sly, members of our church. I don't know if anybody remembers them, but anyway, that's how I got to college. We didn't have a car. We had a truck for my father to deliver oil, but we didn't have a car at that time. I went there, and when I was finished going to school, we started what was called a play group here. It was started by Gene Rosenberg, Gracie Fankhandel, and the minister's wife had a lot to do with it too, and that was Pastor Roberts' wife, Sybil. it was a fun group. We met at the old church, and I substituted once in a while when I was free to do it, but mostly I stayed home because I'd gotten married in the meantime and was having my own family, and I wanted to stay home with the children, which I did until my daughter was 5, and then I did help more at the children's center. I don't remember the exact year we came down here, but when the building was finished, this wing was all volunteer labor, and when it was finished, we moved the preschool from the old church down here and started out, and about that time Frances Desmond became the director, and she worked for part of the year, and her husband became ill, and she decided she didn't want to work anymore and wanted me to take over, which I did. And then like Topsy, this place just grew. It wasn't, people began to come to Lakeside to live, and I don't know, we just started filling up the house. First we'd add one more room, and then just kept growing, and then one day I said to Pastor Robert, people keep asking for daycare. I don't know, most of the people had been coming just for an enrichment program, just a place for the children to play and learn a few things, but anyway, they wanted daycare, and so the first house over across the way here became available, and we decided to, we didn't really have the money to, but we went out on a limb, and the church, Pastor Roberts was a great one for that. If I said if we needed it, he seemed to think it was okay, and we bought the first one, and then the other people thought, oh gosh, there was a children's center right next door, we're going to sell our house too. So anyway, we did work hard and made the first house into it was a real mess. The people smoked and evidently fried everything, and the walls were all greasy, so we replaced everything in it, and it was all done by volunteer labor. We didn't have the money to go out and spend it, and we did a lot of things probably, well, not many places would have done it, but it was a fun thing in the end. And we did end up buying a second house, and there were people in the church that were very helpful put covers on the tables that we got, and we went up to LA and bought some used children's furniture for them so that we could have it. We started what we call daycare. It just grew. Where the school was, we had every room in this place filled with children, morning and afternoon classes, and there were about over 300 children, but there were no preschools around. And it was just one of those things. We have the office up here with the church office. We moved it down to the other end, and because we had to have more help. But we got enough daycare to fill both houses while I was still running the school, and we had all these classes filled with children too, even these 2 rooms. And then of course as time went on, other schools came along, and schools started making more funding for children, and it became easier for some people. They thought they were getting it for nothing that way, so they didn't come here. So our school is not nearly as large now as it once was, and the church needed more rooms for the church. So anyway, that's all I have to say about it, unless you want to know some of the things we did to make money. We did not have the money to do those projects, and we had taco talks, we did all kinds of things, because in the first place, the houses, when we bought them, we had a few, but that was one of those things that just started, you know, as far as daycare was concerned, all day was a long day for children. And we had hot lunches, we served hot meals, and hired a lot of people that are no longer with us. Like Jerry Delamarter, I know you remember her most of it. Anyway, I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to know about it. I'm ready for questions.
Jean, do you remember what you paid for the daycare houses?
I would hate to tell you what we started out. When we started out, I'll tell you what it was. It was $15 for 2 days, and 3 days was.
No, I mean, what you
but
paid for the
daycare.
property.
How much they cost?
How much?
The houses?
Buildings,
Yeah.
Around 20,000.
What year would that have been, Jim?
What year?
What year? Yeah.
Don't ask me those things. It's a terrible thing. You should, I'm sure you should remember all that, but I don't.
It's okay.
But you know, my oldest son is gonna be 51 in July, and he went to preschool here, and I think it was $13 a week,
Yeah.
if that, or it's 13 a month. It's 13 for something.
Well, no, it wasn't a week. When we started out, I mean, and the thing of it is, you know, everybody, I'll have to tell you, this other feature I'd like to tell you about. We did a lot of things that probably were illegal because, not on purpose, but we had garden, Lakeside garden, people came over and rototilled the land, and we had a garden for the children, and we did a lot of things. And what our staff grew, as it grew larger, excuse me, some of them they were married, they had children, and so we took care of the children down by the kitchen. We had a room there that is a classroom now, but we made that into a nursery, and the children, one of the girls that was a teacher who'd had a child, took care of the other babies. We took care of these children that were of our staff. That was part of our program. And we learned a lot of things as a group. We all became really good friends. And every year, in order to get ready to start, the staff, believe it or not, took every bit of furniture out of every one of these rooms. It was outside. We mopped and waxed the floors several times so that it was easy to care for all year. We had curtains at the bottom there that we had made, and we washed them. We didn't have them anymore. A lot of things that we did are not legal now. You'd have to, you couldn't possibly ask a staff teacher, for instance, to get out and mop the floor or do those things, but we did. And we cooked in the classroom. We did all kinds of things that probably we cannot do anymore. The laws have changed. And I don't know, if you got any questions,
Over here.
When you went down Woodside to where your father said that this is where we're gonna live, where exactly was that? Is there
Where I
still a
live?
house there?
right at the bed, there's a lodge or something that's on what was our
Oh,
property.
Elks Lodge?
Yeah,
The VFW hall?
yeah, and there's
VFW halls in the park.
There's the corner there. There was a big two-story house on the corner, then the rest of that property was ours.
Oh.
And my
It
dad,
burned down, didn't it?
what?
Did the
Oh,
house burn
yes,
down?
we had lots of tragedies during that time, and if you had a few minutes to look at the book, you'd see our preschool had lots of tragedies also. Not only our preschool, this church, this was all under mud. And the first flood we had, there was no drainage ditch out here. I mean, the water came right down Channel Road. It was when we had a flood. And the fire trucks came and got the children from the school because it happened so fast the first time.
Was that 1974? Was that 1974?
Probably the first one, but that's another thing, I can't tell you the exact years,
Next
but
would have been
then, then we
78,
flooded, we
yeah.
flooded, and you can see the pictures here if you're interested at all, and this was all under mud, even into the church, and every one of these rugs that are in the floor, on the floor were, I don't mean these, but the ones that were here, were covered in mud. There's pictures there of them all, if you'd like to look at them.
And so was Lakeside Gardens.
Yeah, Lakeside Gardens up here too.
Channel
One second.
Road was gone, and
I'm sure I'll have to log out, but
Well, I was gonna start by singing, but I changed my mind.
Oh, we'd love to hear you sing.
You pass this around.
Okay.
This is my dad on the horse, that's the old rodeo grounds behind this wall.
Okay.
And just over from here was the railroad track, so we,
What year was this?
I think that was 49.
49. Okay. Okay, maybe you didn't know, but this is his dad, and the old rodeo grounds and the train tracks were here, and it was about 49.
Who?
Good stuff.
I was gonna put my notes on this, but I forgot. Although this is the side. Well, beans were right close here. I'll start with the old rodeo grounds, which was down this way. This side of Mapleview, all that area in there. And that the picture that I have there shows the fence on the north side of the rodeo grounds. And then where they had the booth for the speaker. But then the the grounds was, the grandstands was all wooden. And then the tin roof and all, of course. But one thing I remember about it, I was 6 years old, I think. I had to go to the bathroom, so they had bathrooms down underneath. I got down there and went to the bathroom and come out and forgot how to get back to where my mom was. Well, my cousin Bill Keener come up and said, "You lost Fritz?" I said, "Yeah, I wanted my mama." So he took me to my mother. But anyway, that rodeo grounds, I forget the last rodeo that was there, but after the rodeo, they had old jalopy races and things like that, and even midget cars they had for quite some time. So, and then for a few years they had what was called the 49er days. They had a parade, and then all the festivities was in the rodeo grounds. And one thing I wanted to tell about this side of the stands, there was an area like this. It was open. It was all cement floor, but that's where they had a band or whatever. People came and wanted to play for the dances. And coming down on each side were places where little spots where people brought their goodies for sale and all. So after every rodeo, there was always a dance. So it was, and this is, of course, some people don't realize it, but this rodeo that they have now doesn't have anything to do with that. There was two businessmen in Lakeside, one the blacksmith, and the other was a banker, and they're the ones that started the rodeo and built the grounds and everything.
The new ones or the old ones? The old one. The old one.
Yeah. So
What were their names, Fritz?
Then they started the one over here on Mapleview. Where that is, that was all open there. Where El Capitan High School is, that was Cactus Farm. And then in Mapleview and Laurel, where my granddad and my mother and uncle lived, and they had property on both sides of there and on the other side of Mapleview.
Sandy wants to know, it was Llama Dread and Swearingen?
Bob Swearingen.
Llama Dread.
Yeah. And he was also, he was a banker, and then he owned the two-story building that was on the corner Lakeshore Drive and Main Street that's been torn down. But there was little apartments above that they rented, and underneath was the feed store and hardware. And I was 11 years old, and right where his counter was and everything, where he would be behind. And then you went up a ramp to where the feed store was. It was hard because the trucks could back to it. But anyway, several times I went by, and boy, that 22 gun sure looked good, you know. And one day, Mr. Swearing said, would you like that 22? I said, I sure would, but I don't have enough money to buy it. He said, well, it's only $12. Well, you pay me $1 a week and you can take it home. So, and I still have that 22, single shot in my gun case at home. So, anyway, and then the bank was on that corner right across, and the post office, the bank was this in front, and the post office was on that side in the back. And then the next building was a pool hall. And all this, I mean, there was no liquor or anything in there. We could go in, we couldn't go back to the card room where the pool tables were. We could play on the pool tables. So that was quite a history. But then the train, if I remember right, it came in on Wednesdays. And most of the tracks was right where the freeway is, and then it followed the freeway down to Santee, and then curved and went on to El Cajon and San Diego. So those tracks there would come through El Cajon and all those were the original tracks. Of course, they've been replaced, but that's the original route. And there was a big feed store there named Bacon's right on the corner where Sonic Burgers are now. And then we come to the McLean Dairies. Okay, those were two brothers. Anyway, all this area here they owned, and this was all alfalfa fields in here. And then where the Bonds was or where they closed now, but that was all alfalfa. And then that dairy they had at that time was where the Lemon Fresh School is. And then in later years, there was 3 dairies in was called Extra Valley, and then it was called San Vicente. Now it's called Marino. But there was 2 dairies, 2 brothers on the east side, and all up along that whole length of that highway was alfalfa. The south side was another dairy. And he also had alfalfa. But in those days, that's where the 67 went through Ramon, went through where the San Vicente Dam is. And then it went, the grade coming down was called Muzzy Grade. There was always truck accidents on that because the brakes would get hot and all. So, and then the dairies in El Monte, when I was a kid, there was 3 dairies there, and at that time they all raised alfalfa and also corn for the silage. And then when they were bringing in made the silage, you know, the blower would blow it up into the silos, and they hired us kids to go in there and stomp it so they could get more in. So that was a lot of fun. And then I come to the lemon grove acreage all over here for lemon orchards, all on the south side of Woodside. Lemon orchards, all that area, where all those houses are, for lemon orchards. And then next to Woodside, going towards the school, on the south side of Woodside, was only 2-3 houses, all that stretch. But there was one area where there was olive trees. They had that for quite some time there. And then there was also acres of oranges. But and in those days when I mean, you know, it seems like when we were growing up here, it was a lot colder than it is now. I mean, there were 18, 20 degree mornings. And what they used to have to form the lemon trees, we called them smudge spots.
Mm-hmm.
And they used distillate oil. Okay, when they hired some of the school kids to come in and light them for them, you know. Gary remembers that back there. But then when we'd come in on a school bus going down to the grammar school, it was just, you were just under a layer of like fog. There was so much snow. And so anyway, that was quite an interesting deal. But also, I wanted to tell you about the buses. They have buses for everything now. The kids for this, kids for whatever. There's several. There used to be one bus in El Monte. Now there's 5 come up there every morning and afternoon. But anyway, like when the bus was in El Monte, Coach Head, the coach at Grossmont, he drove the high school bus. And they would pick up high school and grammar school. And then you get to the grammar school, they would unload, and there were high school kids that would come from Verona on the grammar school bus, and they go on to Grossmont. So buses were used solely for that. And I can remember, if it hadn't been for Coach Ed driving the bus, I'd never been able to play football at No Cap, because my dad wouldn't
Rosemont,
be
you
able
didn't
to
go
come
to
get
no
me.
cap.
I mean,
Rosemont.
Grossmont. So, and then there was a couple of wine grows, and where the substation is now, when you go by Lake Jennings, that was owned by a man called Jim Mateo, and his son still lives in El Cajon. But he had all that area. Of course, that hill has been all taken out there now. But he had, there's one house that back up there, and that was all wine, orchard, or groves, I mean, vineyard, I'll get it right. But, and then where the Catholic Church is, on the other side coming towards where Linda Park School is, that was another area that the fellow had grapes, and they were the big red ones. They were sure good. We'd be walking by there and look in, you know. We didn't see him anywhere. We'd go in there and get a taste of his grapes. Here he come. You kids, I told you before to get out here, so that's what we did.
Now we're getting to the nitty-gritty.
Yeah. And then the Hartung Bakery, where Alberto's is there by across from Leo's, that's where my granddad's bakery was. That's over 100 years ago. And the brick oven he built is still there. You go in it on the outside towards that building, you can still see that old brick oven he built. And then, well, that's about all, I guess, unless you have any questions.
Now, this was a dairy? here?
No, the dairy, well, McLean's granddad, or their granddad McLean, where Napa Auto Parts is, right in there, that's where the old dairy was. But then when the boys had it, they had it where the Lemon Crest School is.
And what about right here then?
It
What
was all
it?
alfalfa.
Alfalfa.
Yeah.
And I understand that whoever owned that donated it to the church,
They
or
did.
Yeah,
very
my-
cheap
My
price?
understanding is they donated for where the houses are. But I don't know whether
Yes, they did.
they don't donate to the
Yes.
church
Yes.
also.
That was all right.
Can you tell me how you used the lake? Did you guys go swimming in it?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
The
We,
postmaster used to
We
say,
and-
all did.
Yeah.
I did.
My Uncle Wes, he was a caretaker at in the park. Some 40 years he was there. But anyway, where the boathouse was, it's back farther where it is now. You know, it went in, it's kind of narrow there, maybe 200 or 300 feet wide. And the boathouse sit right there in the water. And then they had a walkway all the way across that you could go into the park. And then get up into the boathouse, and it had places where you could sit. And then if you had a rowboat or whatever, they had them there for rent. But they come in, it was open there up to where you could sit, and we used to fish in there in the good old days. And by the way, you all heard of Flossie Beadle.
Yeah.
Well, my Uncle Wes married her. She'd been married before, but anyway, she's one that, when they was going to put in a gas line in line of these cork elm trees that used to be over here on Woodside, she sat there with her shotgun and a rocket share quite some time before they could come in there. But she lost the battle, of course. But Woodside, there for a section, was all the beautiful cork elms. It was like driving into a tunnel. They were so thick on both sides. And
Fritz, you know the big mural over here on, it's on the outside wall of one of the buildings at Main and Woodside, shows a racetrack going on. Do you know where that was?
well, it was all around the lake. Of course, I never did see any racing there, but the racetrack was gone. But it went kind of this side of Julian and up to the next, the next street of there. And then it came down just about where Lakeshore is and crossed about where the community center is.
That was 1906 when they had those races. I mean, the important race was in 06, yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody remember anything about the hotel that was there?
I don't remember anything about it. I was
That was
born
long
in
ago.
1928, so,
It
That
burned
was
down in
where the
29.
when I lived, huh?
It burned in 29, I think.
Do you know, Edna, about he asked a question about the inn.
The Lakeside
The
Inn.
The old
Lakeside.
museum.
No, the inn.
That they tore down.
Oh, I think that's what Flossie had. It was in, I think it was in her home at first, wasn't it?
No.
No.
Well, I know
Hotel.
she had a museum there.
Yeah, no, the hotel.
She must
They mean the
have-
Oh, the
hotel.
hotel.
Yeah.
The big old.
Oh, yes, let me think, well, whoever, and that hotel, you know,
John
was
Gay.
Coronado.
John Gay.
John
Hotel del Coronado of the Hills.
Yeah.
It was patterned after the one in Coronado. And so the people that had it, bought it, wanted to fence off the lake, and it belonged to the hotel, and nobody else could use it. So the people took them to court, and they lost, of course. I mean, the people won. That lake was dedicated to the people by the Elkhorn Land Company. And so it made the person so provoked, right this minute I can't name him.
John Gay.
It made him so upset at that he said, when I'm gone, we're to tear down the hotel, and that's why it was torn down. But you know, there was an interesting thing that we found out. When we wanted to build El Capitan High School, now there was only Grossmont, that was the one, when Gene and I went, that was the only one in all East County. And then first one was Helix, La Mesa, and El Cajon. So then when we wanted one in Lakeside, and my uncle Clarence Foster was on the board, La Mesa and El Cajon, no, we can't. They can keep going to Grossmont, riding buses to Grossmont. We haven't got enough money. So he did a lot of research in the county recorders and receivers, and he pointed the figures out that Lakeside had a higher tax rate, more money coming from taxes, property taxes, than El Cajon and La Mesa put together. And they said, well, that can't be. Why is that? And they said, well, La Mesa and El Cajon didn't have any much farming, not much. But we had avocados here, we had oranges, we had lemons, we had,
Alfalfa.
well, all those things that brought the tax rate up.
So that's how we got El Cap.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, that's,
otherwise we wouldn't. Now we have what, is it 11 or 12 just
Wow.
in the district?
Oh, they're trying to get 12 in Alpine.
Yeah, they haven't done it yet.
Yeah.
No.
But anyway, when they were tearing down the hotel, and some of these books here, you can see there's an old Model T truck coming out of the front. My dad was the driver on that. So, but anyway, I want to get back to Aunt Flossie. She was married before, and her husband passed away. And she had 2 children, a boy and a girl. Bob Sangster, he built a lot of the homes on Maple View and that area there. But anyway, where Peyton's Hardware is, back there was some small cabins along there. Well, when Uncle West and Flossie were first married, that's where they lived, and they hadn't been married too long, and I think at that time I was probably 7 or 8. But my folks, my sister and I went to visit them, and first thing that came up after a while was she wanted me to call her Annie. She called me Annie Flossie. No, I was being stubborn, I won't. She says, well, I'll tell you what I'm gonna do. Before the evening's over, if you don't call me Annie, you're gonna get a spanking, I'm gonna take you right across my knees. And right away I said, Annie Flossie. Are there any more questions that we can answer? I had more things I could say, but maybe at another time, probably have other things to do.
How about Betty?
I wasn't in on this in the beginning, but now I am, so. Unlike these 3, I did not like Lakeside. I lived in beautiful downtown Burbank. My father was a painting, wallpapering contractor. The studios were 2 or 3 blocks from my home. I got to scamper there while he was doing studio work. I saw it all big time. And then my aunt, well, his aunt, had a turkey ranch up on the corner of Riverview and what used to be Oak. It's now Creekford. 6 acres. Turkeys. What I knew about turkeys? No, nothing. So he was trying to come, her husband was a paraplegic. She died suddenly of a stroke. He was left with turkeys. And we were the closest relatives. So my poor dad was trying to do his work, and then we'd come on weekends. He tried to hire, but it didn't work out. And at that same time, it was war time, and his paint, all the paint had lead, and the lead was being used for bullets and tanks and whatever. So it was getting hard to get. And he said, well, Mother, I think it's time we move to Lakeside. She cried, I cried, but we came. And I hated it, absolutely hated it. And it was a family operation, so I was involved in egg cleaning and all of that. I mean, imagine the world I left and the world I came to. But shortly after I met the girl at the end of our property, Joyce Langlois, and her dad was real estate, newspaper, whatever, and he had a small little dairy, and we became friends and still are, and that made everything okay. And then 4th grade, Gary Gilbert was in the class along with several others, and it was a good class, and I loved it, and everything is good.
Tell us more about Gary.
Oh, Gary was a good guy. He's a good guy. We didn't have very many troublemakers. And then some of the, 43, and then it was actually January 44. And some of the Indian kids didn't have the wherewithal to learn, and so we were tutors, unofficial tutors, but we got them through. So I remember being not very big, and a man named, boy named Eugene Queetack, twice as big as I was, but he didn't intimidate me. I just taught him what I was supposed to teach him. I guess you couldn't do that now, I don't know. I mean, I wasn't a teacher, but I got him through, so I guess that's all that mattered. And Gary's dad had poultry, so we were sort of, you know, the put-upons. Well, everyone else we thought was at the malt shop. We were busy with eggs and what have you. But I, of course, didn't know I was gonna meet my future husband. So, and that made it worthwhile after a while, but I too went to Grossmont bus. And then my senior year was when Helix was being built. So the Grossmont kids went in the morning and the Helix kids went in the afternoon. And we still have reunions together. Last one was the 60th, so we sort of stuck together even though we were two separate schools. And then it went on and on. The schools were built and the kids didn't have to, right? But it used to take us a long time to get from Lakeside. And my bus, when I was in grammar school, went to Verona, came back, stopped at the grammar school, you know, let us off, picked up high school. High school bus, same thing. We had to do that whole route. There just weren't that many buses. You did it. I did a lot of homework on the bus. It was fine. But if you don't know, that's what I say about Lakeside now. People who come here now may think a whole different story than what we did as growing up here. But
How'd you meet Fritz?
how'd I meet him? Okay, well, my parents eventually sold the turkey ranch, and it became many houses. And they had a paint store. He saw a need for customized help, and if any of you remember the Edgars, they nearly built their home out of my dad's store, because he would go to town, get the asphalt tile, got the paint, got everything that he could get for them.
Tell them the name. Tell them the name.
Oh, the name of the store was Bowl Paint Pot. And I don't know how they came up with that, but they did.
Station.
Yeah, it's right across from
It's right across
Texas.